Last hour today, 365 Sports, and we have hit two of the four schools that are in the Final Four. We'll have Alabama featured tomorrow, and Brian Neubert, blackandgold.com, joins us. Purdue is a part of it, and man, has to be a sense of relief. Brian joins us on 365 Sports. Is that what it is, Brian?
Yeah, gold and black.
What did I say?
Black and gold.
Black, oh, my God. Of course not. I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah. It's I think it was a sense of relief for a lot of people. I think it was, something Purdue has kind of carried itself all season long, expecting to do. I think what happened to them at the end of last year really sort of toughened them up and really kind of created a resolve in them that this season almost came off like more of a mission than like a season or an opportunity. And I think they've carried themselves in a very business-like manner. So I'm sure there was some relief, but at the same time, I think this is kind of what Purdue expected the whole season long, just because they held themselves to a really high standard and felt like they were good enough to do this, obviously were good enough to do this. I think what people don't realize about last season at Purdue was that wasn't really their opportunity. They were just way too good, way too fast. But they were still playing freshman guards at the end of the year. They were still kind of playing over their heads to a certain extent. They still didn't have the balance that you necessarily need to win in March. Now all those other pieces around Zach Edey, who were really advanced as freshmen, are now much more caught up than they were last year. So as soon as Zach Edey announced he was coming back to Purdue this year, this became Purdue's big opportunity. And I think a lot of people recognize it as such. Purdue carried itself all season long like this was almost sort of its quote-unquote destiny.
Brian, you mentioned the word mission there. The where it comes through to me is clearly at the end of games or when they start to put someone away. You can tell that there's like no question as to how the end of the game has to go. It was that way against Tennessee. Is that veteran maturity you're talking about, the guys are a year older, and look, Zach Edey knows that, look, he's got this time to make it work, or Purdue's not in the Final Four, and they just get so locked in.
Yeah, they're extremely close. I mean, they played all season long together with the majority of this group. They have a couple of new guys this year that have really completed them, but I think people underestimate the value of guys playing together for an extended period of time, and that's not really the direction college basketball is headed in right now. You have so many teams bringing in new transfers every year, and Purdue is banked on continuity. And I think when things have gotten kind of hairy for them at the end of games, I think that continuity really shows up because all those guys out there kind of trust one another. They all sort of share a brain, and they all fall back on their past experiences together. And there really hasn't been anything that this group hasn't been through together. I mean, they've been in, they've lost in the worst manner imaginable in the NCAA tournament. They've won Big Ten titles. They've won the Maui Invitational. They won the PK 85 last year. They've beaten blue blood after blue blood after blue blood. They played road games in the Big Ten, which is no joke. They've won most of them, and they've just been through everything together. And I think that comfort with one another, that trust in one another, really sort of shows up at the end of these games. A couple weeks ago, Purdue played at Illinois late in the regular season on Illinois Senior Day, in a very, shall I say, toxic environment. And that was a tie game against a team that was playing, damn near as well as any team in the country, a really, really hostile environment. And Purdue really kind of got itself together at the end, pulled away, and won that game. And it's just the sort of thing you don't see teams that don't really come together at the right time do. They're just really mature. They're really tough. And I think everything they went through last season, particularly that FDU loss, really sort of toughened them up. I don't think there's anything that really kind of gets to them. They're extremely poised. They're extremely businesslike. They don't get rattled. They fell behind 11 points in the first half yesterday against Tennessee and responded with a 15-0 run. A lot of teams would have gotten shook there and things would have gone sideways on them. That's not what this team has done all year long. They've just been really, really comfortable in those situations and not panicked one bit.
Brian, we see Zach Edey. People see him. He's 7'4", so of course they expect everything from him. And then yesterday, 40 points in the win, and man, he's taken this program on his back, and that's not always easy to do. What kind of person is he? Is he? Because if people look at a guy that tall, they think he's probably quiet and shy. Who is Zach Edey?
He's a really laid-back, kind of happy kid, but he's also way more competitive than I think people realize. His effort is really good. His work ethic is really good. His consistency is off the charts. He doesn't really have off games. He doesn't really have bad games. And even when he does have a game that's not as good as his other games, it's still like 20 and 14. He's just unbelievably consistent. And I think that that trickles down to this whole team. I think his competitive nature has really trickled down to this whole team too. The physical tone he sets in games really affects every game he plays in. Obviously, he commands a lot of attention, draws a lot of contact, things like that. But he sort of embraces it. It doesn't bother him anymore the way it used to. I mean, I'm so tired after 4 years of him of writing about the officiating and arguing with people about the officiating after every game, but he does get fouled, like probably 5 times more than it gets called. And it used to get to him. It used to really rattle him, and he used to lose his cool periodically. He grew out of that probably halfway through last year, and just the poise he shows out there has been really a big part of what has made Purdue really good, on top of the relentless effort, the work ethic, the competitiveness, things like that. He's a great teammate. He doesn't like talking about himself. He uses his social media channels to promote teammates for awards and things like that. And I don't think Purdue could ask any more of him as a person, as a player, than what they've gotten out of him here the last 2 years especially, but since the beginning of his Purdue career, at the start of 2020. So it just almost one of those too good to be true sorts of guys.
So we know about the history of Purdue, first time since 1980. The constant, heartbreaking with Gene Cady, and I love watching him coach. Painter played there at Purdue, was named like an associate head coach for the first year. Didn't go real well, but he and Quanzo Martin coached together on that staff. What does this mean to a guy that played there? Because sometimes going back to your alma mater does not always work.
Yeah, no, it's kind of meant the world to him. He came back. He was the head coach at Southern Illinois for 1 year. He replaced Bruce Weber at Southern Illinois, who was the longtime Gene Cady assistant. Bruce brought Painter with him when he got the SIU job. And then after 1 year as head coach, Purdue decided it was going to go in a different direction with Gene Cady. He wasn't fired, but they weren't going to give him, a contract into perpetuity. He was going to retire. So they brought in Painter as an associate head coach for a year with the plan of him taking over after 1 year. Not a lot of guys would have signed up for that. Not a lot of schools would have done that sort of thing. It worked out beautifully for Purdue. I can't not say there wasn't a little bit of luck involved, that they happened to get the perfect guy at the perfect time who was willing to do something like this. But it has worked out beautifully. Painter is really deferential to Cady. He loves the guy. Kind of talks about him like he's a second father, and really deflects a lot of credit to the people who sort of came before him at Purdue, notably Gene Cady, notably a lot of his former teammates, a lot of the players who signed up to play for him at Purdue when Purdue was bad. which they were in the early days because they just didn't have a lot of players. And a lot of their best players were hurt when Painter took over. It was really kind of a total rebuild sort of situation. So they've come a long way since then, and he's built this thing back up into something that's even kind of exceeded what it was back in its glory days there in the 80s and 90s. And but he's always pointing to the past. He's always bringing people back. He's always talking to his players about the people at Purdue came before them and how much that matters. And he's really trying to keep a really tight circle. Katie's always around. He comes back up here at the end of every year, travels with them in the NCAA tournament. He's on the phone with Painter, probably more than Painter has time to chat with him all the time because Gene likes to talk on the phone. But no, it's a very tight knit kind of basketball quote unquote family at Purdue, and Gene's sort of becoming the cool grandfather.
I've noticed that he has eschewed the comb over, which I find heartbreaking, but still, it's probably a better look for him overall. Brian,
talking about Katie?
Yeah. David Letterman used to make fun of him all the time for the comb over. It was pretty legendary. What would it mean to the Purdue fan base, like, to get this done, especially considering they're probably going to have to go through a team like UConn to do it?
It would mean a lot. I think Purdue getting in the Final Four is a really big deal. I don't think there's been a school and a school's following that's been more Final Four hungry in college basketball than Purdue, because it had been so long and Purdue had gotten so close so many times. They've had some horrific luck over the years with the way they lost to Virginia, with the way Isaac Haas broke his elbow in 2017 in the NCAA tournament when Purdue had a legitimate shot to be a Final Four team. The two Robbie Hummel knee injuries, those were two Final Four caliber teams that never got a chance to actually compete at that level because one of their most important players, if not the most important player, got hurt at the wrong time. Not that there's ever a right time, but Purdue's just had some really, really heartbreaking things outside its control. And I think it just meant the world to them to get to the Final Four. But I think, too, that this is a team capable of doing more. The thing about this Purdue team this year is every game they've lost, there were only 4 of them, but they were all directly tied to turnovers. And those turnovers were all probably more about Purdue just kind of losing its focus, not concentrating the way they ought to, as opposed to the defense being better than them. I don't think there's been a game this season where Purdue's best performance, best effort, best version of itself hasn't been enough. And I think Purdue should stack up pretty well with NC State. Now, I think 9 teams in a row have probably said that about NC State, but so you obviously don't want to look past them. They're kind of riding a heater here, but if it gets down to Purdue and UConn, the two seem to be on a collision course here. If Purdue plays its best version of itself, that has never not been enough this season. And obviously UConn is incredible, but Purdue's pretty damn good too. And that would be a hell of a college basketball game. I would tell you that. And I would not bet against either of them. I would not bet on either of them, and I would not bet against either of them.
This just came into my head. Brian, first of all, thanks for your time. Purdue Insider with us on 365 Sports. What is Rick Mount doing? That kind of shows my age. I remember he was a hell of a player in the ABA, but I remember Purdue. I said, Gene Katie, what is Rick Mount doing these days? Do you know?
He is living in his hometown of Lebanon, Indiana. And okay. He is I'm sure still shooting a couple thousand jump shots every day. I know he was for a while there. He's done a lot of instructional work with young players. Other than that, I can't claim to be a Rick Mount expert these days. I've talked to the man once in my life. Yeah.
For those that don't know, he was a an All-American at Purdue back in the day, back in the late 60s, and then went into the ABA and was a hell of a player for the ABA during those early years too. But I wasn't expecting too much. But that's cool that he's hanging around. By the way, I did check to make sure I didn't ask about a guy that was no longer with us, but he is. That's good that he's in Lebanon. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon.
Great shape. Yep.
He's too stubborn.
He is stubborn. He was a hard-nosed dude, man, back in the day.
Yeah.
All right, what's your schedule? When do you leave? When do you go to Arizona?
Well, I'm going down there Wednesday, and then Thursday is all the pregame media stuff, and then Friday's the game, right?
Saturday's the game.
Okay, so I think there's media stuff Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
Yeah, and then the game's Saturday. That kind of shows you what my last 24 hours have been like. I don't even know when the game is.
Tell everybody how much. Tell everybody what your schedule was like when you actually went to bed, if you did, and when you woke up initially. When I and others probably started texting you.
Yeah, so I started. I planned my trip very poorly. I was thinking that a 2:20 game, I could get out of there by 7 o'clock and be home by, you're in West Lafayette after a 4-hour drive at a reasonable hour. And then I didn't count on waiting an hour for post-game stuff to start and then having to worry about more video because of all the celebration stuff that we need to get on the internet nowadays. So I didn't write a word before they kicked us out of Little Caesars Arena. So I get in my car, I start driving. It's 10 o'clock at night, whatever it is. There's nowhere to stop in Detroit to work after we'd been asked to leave the arena. So I just decided I was going to spend the night in Fort Wayne. So I made a hotel reservation in Fort Wayne, finished my work, went to bed at about 4 o'clock this morning. Wanted to get home, so I got up at 9, was on the road. Shortly thereafter, stopped to do a little more work. And then I got home and I went to bed, and I woke up about 15 minutes ago. So you probably did not get the most cognitively sharp version of myself. So I apologize for that. But
you were great, man.
Yeah,
you were great, Brian. Appreciate
that's kind of it.
All right, get some sleep. Thank you very much. Brian Neubert, again, covers Purdue with us on 365 Sports. We've had him on once before.